As we've been telling you, the first draft of the new U.S. congressional districts in the state of Texas is out. Texas gained 2 additional seats as a result of the latest census, and state lawmakers are currently working on redrawing the district maps during the 3rd special session. Professor Jason Casellas of the University of Houston joins us this morning to talk about it. Morning, Professor.
Good morning.
Obviously, in these first maps, as we've been saying throughout the morning, Republicans have led on this process, and Democrats are none too pleased with the first maps as they're drawn.
That's right. I mean, obviously, redistricting is a very political process. It's a process that, politicians are very clear about their goals, which is to gain power and keep it. And so that's what we've seen here in Texas with the first map being drawn by a Republican majority that seeks to protect their incumbents and as well as other incumbents, because protecting incumbents is one of the goals of redistricting, in addition to maximizing your party's power.
I'll jump back to that. Obviously, we know the changing numbers and the big debates that's come from this current census and redrawing process, but it really has, I've been reading some stuff, it is favorable to incumbents really of both parties. We see just fewer competition for any of the seats, even the ones held by Democrats. And again, that's probably not unexpected in this process.
Right, because there's only so much that the legislature can do in terms of sort of packing and creating sort of safe districts. And one of the things, these members of Congress are colleagues, and so they want to make sure that their colleagues are looked out for, because partisanship changes, right? So maybe 10 years from now, Democrats will be in control, and those Republican incumbents will want their own seats to be safe. And so it's sort of a system in which both sides kind of look out for each other. But at the same time, keep in mind, of course, that these new seats, we have 2 new seats in Texas, and obviously, one of them was created in the Houston area that would seem to favor a Republican, and of course, Austin finally gets, Travis County finally gets its own strongly Democratic district.
So it is interesting to see, again, the work that's being done with the changing demographics in the state of Texas that we did see from the 2020 census, and maybe districts being drawn that many are saying are not reflecting that, and that's kind of the heart of this debate this time around.
Right, and so one of the things to keep in mind that's new about this redistricting year is that since 1965, when the Voting Rights Act was passed, states in the South, including Texas, were subject to what was called pre-clearance, which meant that any changes in district lines had to be approved by the Department of Justice in Washington. But since the Shelby case, Supreme Court case a few years ago, this is the first time in redistricting that Texas does not have to submit to what's called pre-clearance. And so that means that Texas's district lines don't have to be pre-approved by the Department of Justice. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be any lawsuits. There will be lawsuits under what's called Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which is still in effect. And that section just basically says that you cannot discriminate on the basis of race or ethnicity. You can discriminate on the basis of party. So the challenge is sort of how do you disentangle race, ethnicity, and party?
I'm probably asking too tough a question with limited time left, but how do you see this playing out then? Do you think the people opposed to these maps as they're drawn right now will be able to stop it, or do you think this probably goes forward?
Well, this will go into the courts. There will be lawsuits. So there may be some tweaks to these maps. And I think the Republicans certainly have drawn the maps to try to make sure that they comply with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. I mean, I think one of the things that many civil rights groups, African Americans and Latinos, will point to the fact that, for example, Latino majority districts have gone down from 8 to 7, and there are no more Black majority districts. And so that, I think, will be pointed to by minority groups as a violation of the Voting Rights Act. Republicans might defend it, saying that they're creating more what they call majority opportunity districts. So I think there's a lot of room for interpretation here, and that's where the courts and judges will come in.
Absolutely. The process will continue. We appreciate your insights. Jason Casellas from the University of Houston. Thank you so much for your time.
You bet. Thanks.
We'll be right back.